The most dangerous thing in a person is absolute certainty. Speech in the spirit of Eckhart Tolle. In the stillness of the present moment, beyond the noise of thought and opinion, there lies a subtle but profound truth. Absolute certainty is a form of imprisonment. When the mind clings tightly to its own ideas and beliefs, it creates a barrier, a veil that separates us from reality as it truly is. This rigid certainty blocks awareness, blinds us to the flow of life, and keeps us trapped in the narrow confines of egoic identity. Eckhart Tolle teaches us that true freedom arises not from knowing, but from being, from surrendering the need to be right and opening ourselves to the vastness of what is. The greatest danger is not in doubt or questioning, but in the refusal to question, in the dogmatic insistence that our perspective alone is the truth. Such certainty kills presence, kills compassion, and ultimately kills the possibility of transformation. Let us explore together why this certainty is the greatest threat to our inner peace, to our relationships, and to the collective awakening of humanity. Have you ever walked into a room, smiled at someone, exchanged a few polite words, but deep inside, something made you feel uneasy? It's not an obvious danger, no angry looks, no harsh words, but a quiet, vague feeling, as if that smile didn't truly come from genuine presence, but was a mask, as if they weren't really looking at you, but looking through you, or worse, they were seeing something inside themselves that they couldn't accept. That feeling, it is not paranoia. It is a deep awareness within you, ringing like a bell, signaling a lack of presence. Eckhart Tolle does not call this a warning about bad people, but rather an awakening to the ego, both in others and in yourself. There are people who carry a fracture, not because they are bad, but because they have become too identified with the mind's image of themselves, an image they try to maintain at all costs. They may appear charming, spiritual, or trustworthy, but behind that appearance is an unrecognized inner battle between the self they try to be and the truth they are avoiding. In that battle, anyone who appears and reflects back the part they are not ready to face becomes the enemy, not because that person is bad, but because they have unconsciously assigned the role of the dark part within themselves to the other. Tolle calls this the ego and its projection mechanism. When a person cannot accept emotions like anger, jealousy, or the desire for control within themselves, they see those things in others, not through reason, but through such strong emotions that they believe it to be true. And you, who live in the present in openness, can suddenly be pulled into their psychological drama, like a role they need to maintain the story of the ego. This does not mean you have to judge them. On the contrary, as Tolle once said, you recognize it and still keep presence within yourself, because you are not the role they assign to you, and they are not really the person behind the ego you are seeing. You may feel drained, confused, and lost after such interactions, but that only happens when you lose connection with the present moment and start reacting from your own ego. When you are awakened, you don't need to fight or run away. You just need to see not through the lens of the past, not through the mind's reactions, but with the light of pure awareness. And in that awareness, you are no longer a victim. You are the deep stillness, not swept away by someone else's darkness. As Tolle says, when you live in the present, there is no problem, only a situation, and every situation can be accepted, acted upon, or left, but without suffering. So if you ever find yourself confused by someone saying all the right things but still making you feel off-center, return to the present. Be present. That is where darkness dissolves not by force, but by the light of awareness. Shiheni is not an ordinary philosopher or psychoanalyst. He is a seeker, not seeking the light at the end of the road, but the light that illuminates the dark corners people usually avoid. He does not seek enlightenment to achieve something, but to clearly understand the shadow that the ego has created within each of us. He once wrote that one of the most dangerous phenomena does not come from malice, but from unconscious identification with archetypal images, such as the Savior, the Prophet, the spiritual teacher, the perfect mother, the silent sacrificer. Eckhart Tolle calls it archetypal possession, when an individual no longer acts from pure presence in the moment, but is possessed by a role larger than themselves. They no longer speak as a present human being, but as if a force is speaking through them. Their ego has put on a garment that is too large, too sacred, too grand, to the point that they are no longer themselves. The scary thing is not that they have bad intentions. It is that they believe in that role absolutely. Anyone who challenges, questions, or simply does not submit will be seen as opposing the cosmic mission. They are no longer just defending the ego, but protecting a symbol, a belief, and that is why they cannot listen. Tolle once said, the ego never feels enough. It always needs to reinforce its image through roles, identities, or superiority over others. And in the case of archetypal possession, the ego not only wants to stand out, it wants to become a symbol, to become the voice of something greater than the individual. But where there is an image, there is illusion. And when you lose presence to become an image, you also lose the ability to truly connect with yourself and with others. These people no longer feel real. You cannot touch their vulnerability, gratitude, or simple joy. Everything seems serious, fateful, or sacred, but emotionally empty. And then, as Shiheni warned, that mask, no matter how divine, will consume the real face beneath it. They no longer know who they are without that role, and that, precisely that, is the deepest form of suffering, not knowing who you are without the validation of others. So, what is the path to liberation? Tolle reminds us that freedom does not come from perfecting the role, but from stepping out of identification with it. It is when you see thoughts, emotions, roles, and realize, I have them, but I am not them. It is when you see yourself stepping into the role of the good person, the knowledgeable one, the healer, and you smile, returning to the present, where there are no roles at all, only pure presence. Because only in the present are you truly free. When someone is taken over by the warrior, they must keep fighting, even when there's no enemy, because the energy no longer comes from presence, but from identification. And identification is the root of suffering, not because the archetype itself is evil, but because it replaces the spaciousness of being with the rigidity of form. This is what Eckhart Tolle calls the pain body's alliance with the ego. When unconscious patterns fuse with identity, they become addictive. They give a sense of meaning, purpose, even destiny, but it's a meaning divorced from the now, from silence, from true presence. Possession, in this sense, is not something dramatic or mystical. It is the absence of inner space. It is when a thought becomes more real than awareness itself. It is when a role becomes so loud that it drowns out the stillness from which all life emerges. Shihani understood this deeply. What he called the collective veil is what Tolle would call the collective unconsciousness, a psychic fog passed down through generations, thick with history, fear, and unmet longing. Most people live in it without knowing. They are not living so much as being lived by pain, by memory, by archetype, by inherited identity. But something miraculous happens when we become still, when we no longer seek to be the hero, the mother, the sage, or the rebel, when we allow ourselves to simply be, without history, without narrative, without resistance, the veil begins to lift. In that moment, you don't need to fight or fix anything. You don't need to play a role. You are no longer an archetype, playing itself out on the stage of time. You are the awareness behind the story. You are the quiet presence watching the warrior's anger rise and not acting on it. You are the spaciousness that allows the mother's grief to flow without trying to control the child. You are the still field in which the trickster's chaos flickers and dissolves. This is the power of awakening, not to banish the archetypes, but to see them clearly, compassionately, and to choose not to become them, to allow them to pass through you like clouds in the vast sky of presence. Because only when you are no longer possessed by form can you truly love without condition, act without ego, speak without agenda, and in that state you no longer fear the unconscious in others. You see it for what it is, a play of patterns, not good, not evil, just unconsciousness, and in that seeing, your own light grows stronger. So the real question is not how to destroy these ancient forces, it is how to remain awake in their presence. Because when you do, they no longer possess you, they serve you. And you, once fragmented by the pull of stories and roles, return to wholeness, the simple, radiant awareness of now. So, you have begun to see the dark parts within yourself. You have started to face the parts you once tried to deny. But what is the next step? The most important step. It is self-forgiveness. Forgiveness is not about forgetting, nor is it about accepting all the hurt or justifying the mistakes that have happened. Forgiveness is giving yourself the right to heal. It is the first step to freeing yourself from the chains of the past, to telling yourself that you deserve to live fully, deserve to be free. Many of us carry the burden of regret, guilt, and the curses that others have once directed at us. But in reality, those things are not you. They are just wounds, echoes from a time gone by. Remember, you are not your mistakes. You are not your unhealed wounds. You are a whole and complete person, even as you are still on the journey of learning to love yourself. Next, learn how to rebuild your connection with yourself. It sounds simple, but in reality, it is a challenging process. You need to take time to listen to what your heart wants to say, not the words imposed by society, not the expectations of others, but the true voice inside you. Make it a habit to ask yourself every day, how do I feel today? What do I need to feel at peace? What scares me? And how can I embrace that fear instead of running from it? You will gradually realize that this self-awareness is the door that opens to true freedom. And finally, don't forget that you are not alone on this path. Each of us has our own shadows, has walked through the labyrinths of the soul, but it is also through sharing and connection that we find the light. Find those who can accompany you, people who not only see the light in you, but also understand and accept the darkness. Because only when we are fully seen can we truly be healed. Are you ready to step out of the mask, ready to look into the mirror and accept the reflection of yourself with all its truth and beauty? If the answer is yes, continue this journey with patience and love. From here, every step is no longer a repetition of the past, but a new creation, a free choice, an affirmation of your true self. Thank you for being here, for daring to look deeply, for daring to move forward. And if you find this sharing helpful, don't forget to leave a like, share it with those who need to hear it, and subscribe to explore more layers of yourself together. Remember, the greatest journey is the journey back to yourself, and it begins right this moment.